Hello, my friends, and welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time. My name is Jeff Beveridge, and I'm excited to be joining you to present on this topic of being Agile educators, applying Agile mindset and tools to enhance your training projects. You may already know that this is actually part 2 in a series on being Agile educators. Well, it began as a 1-hour video, and then as I heard myself talking about the Agile mindset, we decided to switch gears and say, you know what, this would actually be a lot better as a 3-part short video series. So we're in part 2, Agile in training development. So specifically in this video, we're going to be looking at applying the Agile mindset, frameworks, tools, and techniques to your training development projects. Part 1, we talked about the connections between Agile and ADDIE, that instructional design model of analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate. And there'll be a lot of that talk in here as well. Part 3, we're going to focus more on the classroom, or yes, even the virtual classroom. We'll talk about Agile in training delivery. So I encourage you to check out all 3 videos. I think that whether you're a teacher, whether you're an instructional designer, whether you're a project manager, all of this knowledge could be valuable to everybody. You can watch them really in any order. 1, 2, and 3 is merely the sequence in which they were recorded. So let's go ahead and get started with part 2, Agile in training development. Let's look now at how can we adopt the Agile mindset and Agile tools and techniques in our training development projects. Well, I'll give you a perfect example. We can just be Agile. We can follow an Agile framework. I worked with the VA Acquisition Academy a number of years ago on a project to create program management training. This was my first true Scrum team experience, and we were using Scrum on a curriculum development effort. So yes, it can be done. Even for creating project management training, like I said, we were creating this really great program management fellows program that they have in the Department of Veterans Affairs Acquisition Academy. If you're in or around the VA, check it out. Still exists, ongoing. We do great work there. We were creating curriculum training materials for a live in-person instructor-led training, and we were working on Scrum teams to do it. And so I want to give you just kind of as a brief case study, a rundown of how that worked for us. So we had 3 Scrum teams, about 5 to 7 members each. They were, your cross-functional team of generalizing specialists, where we had, roles of curriculum developers, graphic designers, and technologists, but we helped each other out. We pitched in here and there. Everybody tried to really learn a little bit of everything. We had Scrum Masters and product owners on each of those Scrum teams. So each team had its own product owner. Each team had its own Scrum Master. Now, to be fair, okay, the Scrum Masters at the team level were also curriculum developers. We're juggling roles a little bit there. The product owner was our dedicated team product owner, but certainly that wasn't their only job. That wasn't their only role in the organization, so they weren't 100% dedicated, but it was a great setup. We had engagement from all of the team members, product owner, Scrum Master, everybody on the team. We had really great engagement and buy-in and participation. We did a Scrum of Scrums across the 3 teams, right? We had a project manager who was also the lead Scrum Master, and they led the Scrum of Scrums, where the 3 Scrum Masters from each of those 3 Scrum teams would collaborate on a weekly basis to share best practices, share what's working, what's not working, and kind of collaborate across those teams. We worked in 2-week sprints, so 10 business days. We would do our sprint planning on a Wednesday, work the rest of that week, a full week, little bit, and then sprint review on Tuesday, 10 business days later. So we would end the sprint on the Tuesday, review and retrospective, plan the next sprint the very next day on Wednesday. And I'll offer that as an Agile best practice. Make that sprint transition in the middle of the week as opposed to like start on a Monday, end on a Friday. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, just kind of plain and simple, when are people mentally checked out? Or maybe even like physically checked out? They're not in the office. Monday and Friday. So we want people to be available and attentive to these activities and have their full brain power going. So Mondays and Fridays are not when we're going to have everybody's attendance and, as we said, attention. Additionally, we say that as a best practice, the best time for a retrospective is right before the next sprint planning so that we can, incorporate what we've learned into our plans and not just leave it lessons documented, make it actually be lessons learned and lessons implemented. So a midweek sprint changeover allows for that as well. Instead of documenting our lessons learned in the review and retrospective on Friday, and then going out and having a great weekend and watching our favorite team win and watching the kids play out in the yard and all that stuff, and then come back on Monday morning, not yet had our coffee yet, and be expected to really be firing on all cylinders in a sprint planning meeting, that can be a little bit tough. So why don't we set ourselves up for success and make our sprint break in the middle of the week? It also gives the team one full non-stop Monday to Friday week. If you're doing more than a single week of sprint, like we were doing 2-week sprints, that meant that in the middle, like sprint planning, Wednesday through Friday, do a little bit of work, and then a full week of work without any planning activities, just the daily Scrum, and then sprint review and sprint retrospective the following week. We did our daily Scrums, we had the Kanban board, we used Jira to track all of this online. It was a really, really great kind of immersive experience, and that's one of the things that I like about Scrum as being one of the more prescriptive, predictive is something else, right? As being one of the more prescriptive Agile approaches, Scrum is a really great learning tool because it does kind of tell you what you're supposed to be doing. There's a lot of structure to it. It's built for change, but there's a lot of structure around that change. So some of the best practices that were particularly valuable on that project and in other projects that I've worked on since then, and some of these valuable on non-Agile projects as well, but we'll try to keep our focus on Agile. One, the concept of incremental release and defining your MVP, your minimum viable product, right? The minimum viable product is where we try to identify what is the smallest possible releasable increment of software, for our purposes again, of training, right? What's the smallest thing that if I put out there, it's usable, it could be valuable to a learner, it's releasable content, it's viable as a product. So the minimum viable product, and kind of aiming for what's the very first thing we could release, and let's aim to get it out there. Let's not necessarily aim to build the entire course beginning to end and have it all ready to go before we ever put it out the door. So can we release in modules? Can we release in increments? And especially, I'm sure many of you in the training industry are encountering this year, especially as you think, how can I be doing more work virtual? How can I be shifting my content to virtual? Well, okay, can my 40-hour PMP prep course also be a very large handful of 5-minute micro-learning videos or podcasts or something like that, right? Is the product I'm building actually possibly much smaller than what I thought it was? How can I get valuable content out the door And how can I structure the prioritization of my user stories to focus on getting something out the door rapidly? Continuing on, planning your incremental delivery and release. So from a project standpoint, how are we delivering to the customer? Are we delivering in documents, or are we delivering in product increments like we would like to be with the Agile mindset, right? Documents would be like, I'm going to give you a curriculum design document, I'm going to give you a storyboard, I'm going to give you PowerPoint slides, I'm going to give you an instructor guide, I'm going to give you exercise handouts, the list goes on, and maybe I'm going to create and deliver those things each one at a time in that sequence, one and then the other. Well, none of those items that I just listed standalone is valuable as releasable content. Right? Maybe you could argue, okay, I could just get by with PowerPoint slides, but if I wanted to have all that stuff, right, to run one exercise, I need the slides for that exercise, the artifacts for that exercise, the instructor guide for that exercise, the student materials for that exercise, right? So if I instead thought about creating and delivering in increments, so like just one exercise, just one module of the course, right? With everything, the slides, the artifacts, the IG, the PG, or whatever else you're calling it, whatever design or development artifacts are due to your customers, right? Instead of delivering those piecemeal, could we deliver working software? Again, releasable training, potentially shippable. Is it something that if push came to shove, you could use just that exercise? That was one of the things that we had. Again, if you work with the government and you know that your funding could go away any old time, you want to work with the mindset of, if we stop working tomorrow, let's make sure that everything we did until today is valuable, and thinking about how you would release that content. And again, strategically thinking about, not just release as soon as it's valuable and complete, but also at that sustainable pace for both the teachers, the course developers, the learners, the business stakeholders. Let's make sure that we're not moving too fast. Let's make sure that we're not moving too slowly with our release schedule. We see DevOps on the slide. I'm not going to take a deep dive into that, but I think in the training world, we're already very much used to, we're building it, it's in operations, we're updating it as we go pretty much regularly. So not necessarily a handoff between different business units to build the course and teach the course. I was a little bit surprised when I first got in this game and realized that teacher, instructional designer, subject matter expert, that those were actually three different roles. I thought we all had to be all of those things. Agile embraces all of us being all of those things and not having these siloed handoffs between teams, team members, and business units. We can also look at Agile best practices for building the team, right? We want to structure our project around motivated individuals, as our Agile principles say. We want T people more than we want I people, right? If you think about the capital I, that straight line up and down representing your expertise, right? It's very long, but it's not very diverse. It's not very wide, right? Compare that to a lowercase t. The line of expertise is a little bit shorter. I'm not the most expert in this one topic, but it's also got those branches. We also see the willingness and the aptitude to develop and build other skills. It's okay to build your team with, again, the instructional designer, the graphic designer, the technologist, the instructor, the SME. But we don't want to think of if Bob's not here today, we're just out that role. We want generalizing specialists, T people who are willing to learn, have the willingness and aptitude and even eagerness and motivation to learn all of those things and be able to do all of those things. As is true on any Agile team, in any Agile environment, not unique to training, right? We need a committed product owner. Our principles tell us business people and developers must interact daily throughout the project, and so that means that our product owner is not somebody who just shows up to sprint review, gives their feedback, and walks away, right? Is just present for the meetings. They need to be available and accessible to the team during the sprint. I've had great success with really good product owners. I've had tremendous heartache with product owners who did not embrace this role, and it did not set the team up for success. Same is true for that facilitator role, right? The Scrum Master, the Agile coach, if available, if appropriate, especially early on in your Agile learning journey as a team. If you're new to Agile, right, really invest in having that Agile coach who can help to answer your questions and guide you through the processes and learn the processes. Invest in training. I talk with so many teams who, one or two people on the team have been trained in Agile, but the whole team's supposed to be working in Agile. If it's worth doing, it's worth learning. Let's invest in that learning and set our team up for success. Some even more specific techniques that we can use in training development. One of them that was really valuable to us on a lot of different projects that I've worked on, including that VA project I've mentioned already, was learner personas, borrowed from the software development practice or Agile practice of user personas. It's the same idea. What we're doing is we're getting a bit creative and writing a short bio of a fictitious user or learner in our audience, right? Probably more than one of them. I can recall on that VA project, 5 years later, I can remember we had Angie and Fred, right? They were our fictitious learners, our learner personas that we created. And throughout the project, right, we would create something and we would genuinely have discussions and questions around, well, what would Angie think about this? How would Fred respond to that question, to that exercise? And it was really, really valuable as a discussion prompt. And you know that in any project environment, and again, go back to the analysis component of ADDIE, right? Understanding your audience is critical, key to successful training. You have to know who you're teaching if we're to help them learn, right? So let's put some time and investment into that. And the way this works, I'll walk you through like how we did these workshops. So as a team, we brainstormed potential kind of like categories of learner, right? And then we assigned those categories to small groups. We broke into small teams of just like, 3 or 4 people, and each team working on a category of learner to create a learner persona for that category. Right, and we would, one way to do it is be like, okay, create them a resume, create them a LinkedIn page or a Facebook page, kind of some structure to go with it, or just loose structure, just make it a brainstorming mind map. Give me the elevator pitch introduction of this person and apply, right? Try to think outside the box. Right, if you're familiar with the lean technique of the 7 ways, right? You try to come up with 7 different ways to do something because, the first 3 or 4 are like good ideas. Once you get to 7, you're starting to border on the ridiculous, and that's good. It lets you know that you've probably exhausted all the good ideas or all of the really good home run hitters. You've hit them all, or you've got them, right? Once you're starting to wade into the ridiculous. And so allow yourself the freedom to do that with these learner personas, right? Not just, how old are they? What's their job title? Where do they work? What do they do on a day-to-day basis? But, like, where do they go to school? What level of education do they have? What part of the country or a part of the world are they from? What's their favorite color? What do they do on the weekends? What's their favorite meal, right? Do they have kids? Do they have siblings? Do they have relatives? Really get expansive. Get creative with topics that you don't actually think will be valuable in writing training. Because again, once you wade into the ridiculous, you have exhausted all of the useful, or probably still not, right? But you know that you're well on your way. So it's a really valuable kind of creative thinking and mind expanding exercise for understanding who your stakeholders are and then putting a name to it, right? Actually being able to reference that, fictitious individual, that learner persona. Come back as a large group in your workshop, share what you've come up with, give the groups the opportunity to present. I always love this, even in the classroom, we'll get to that later, but like when you can assign small groups the subtopics and then have them come back together and teach each other, this is always a really great way of working. And so that's how this workshop would happen, right? You would present the learner personas as a large group. You would add to them, kind of continue the brainstorm going for each one. You would identify what are our immediate visible takeaways, like related to these learner personas. And then you could also identify how will we use these moving forward. Will somebody like actually wear this hat in a sprint review meeting? Will we do like a pair programming exercise where one of the programmers is the content writer and the other person is thinking with the learner hat on? So what will be your follow-up actions? How can you use these learner personas? This is one of those things where the discussion is as valuable as the document, right? If you never discuss or if you never mention learner personas again outside this workshop, okay, it's not the end of the world. It was still a valuable exercise. But if you can identify those follow-up actions, now you're really getting value out of it. Now you're really starting to allow this Agile practice to take hold and provide value for your teams. I mentioned just a moment ago, pair programming. This is another Agile practice used in software development, where in software development, literally pair programming, two people would sit at one computer, one of them typing at a time, the other one providing like real-time content review of the code that they're writing. And this is one of those things that admittedly it never once occurred to me that this could be useful for me and my teams, because it's like, well, we don't write code. We're not programming, we're writing training. Duh. Lo and behold, it turns out that this was an incredibly valuable tool for teams that I've worked on. Because as we said, what it does, it allows team members to work together. You are getting a slight slowdown in productivity because it's two people working on one deliverable, but you're getting an increase in quality, right? You're getting rapid feedback on what is being created. Real-time quality, literally on like, you made a typo, you wrote that wrong, that is not how we wanted to say it, that's not coming across the right way. And especially for teaching, right? When we can like say it out loud, have somebody hear it said out loud, is this really the way that we're trying to say it? That real-time rapid feedback, that serves as quality management. Continuous attention to good design and technical excellence, going back to our Agile principles, right? So pair programming provides us that real-time quality control and quality assurance. We're able to engage like different members of the team to work together, and it's not training. It's not take my best team member and pair them with my worst team member, my most senior with my most junior, right? Different skill sets so that they can teach each other. That's not the goal. But gosh darn, if that isn't one of the after effects, right? Of course that still happens. Of course, when we provide these opportunities, right, for the person with 30 years of experience to work with the person who just got out of school last week, right? Not only are we getting value from the deliverables they're creating together, but they're also learning from each other. They can't avoid it. This was used on a team that I worked with. We had some new team members, and when we came on, we saw a severe discrepancy in quality. There weren't even, it wasn't deficiencies, it just wasn't standardized. It didn't look like we all wrote it. It didn't look like one person wrote it, I should say. There was a clear difference. It looked like several different people had written the content. We tried this pair programming approach, not only does it obviously, you're never operating with one voice, but we also see across the board an improvement in quality. Right? The team members who, yes, genuinely prior to this, you would occasionally see some of those defects in the product. We saw a lot less of that, not only when we did pair programming, but then afterwards, even when we worked individually, it was like everybody's quality had been taken to that next level because everybody knew what they were working with. Everybody was kind of on the same page. Very, very valuable as a technique. I've also found a lot of value in WIP limits, work in progress limits, right? Where at the individual level, each team member is allowed to only have one user story in progress at a time. And even across the whole team, we define like how many user stories can be in each of these columns on our Kanban, right? Because the great phrase is stop starting, start finishing, right? You don't want to have a million things in progress. You want to be able to move one of them to done and then move the next one to done. We want to continually move to the right of the board, right? Push it to done. So stop starting, start finishing. We found work in progress limits to be very valuable for highlighting where the bottlenecks were on our team development. And then, of course, building Agile into the learning experience for students, whether or not it's an Agile course, like content-wise. You know, I, of course, hope that if we're building Agile subject matter courses, right, courses about Agile, that we're building Agile into the learning experience. Hopefully we're doing that. But we can embrace the Agile mindset when we're creating any learning experience, right? Empowering and trusting learners to self-organize in their exercises, having face-to-face interactions, building those opportunities, short bursts of learning, short iterations, right? Not the hour lecture, hour-long exercise, hour-long test, and then a 4-minute bathroom break. No, let's work, you know, can we get it down to as short a segment as possible and then move on to the next thing? Maybe same topic, different approach, different visual, different way of learning within that topic. Always kind of moving, always keeping us engaged, keeping us going. Rapid, regular feedback, automated feedback in the virtual environment where we have the technology to have the user answer a question and know instantaneously whether or not they got that question right and how many of their classmates got that question right, anonymously, right? So very valuable if we can get that regular feedback and reflection. And of course, building sustainable pace. I've had the opportunity to observe a lot of virtual training in the year 2020. Surprise, surprise. I'm blown away at how long some of y'all go without taking a bathroom break, for crying out loud. Sustainable pace. Let's try to pause every once in a while. As I'm recording this video, I realize that I can talk for an hour straight as well, so I'm just as guilty of it as all of us. My friends, thank you again so much for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that some of the practices and techniques that we talked about for applying Agile to training development projects prove valuable and beneficial on your training projects. Again, if you have not already, I encourage you to check out the other 2 videos in this series on being Agile educators. We had part 1 on Agile and Addy, talking about how the 2 mindsets and frameworks kind of fit together. And in part 3, you can learn about Agile in training delivery. We'll take a closer look at teaching in the classroom or in the virtual environment, how we can be more agile in our mindset and in our approach to teaching. Again, my name is Jeff Beveridge, and I so enjoy this conversation, although I do wish it were a little bit less of a one-sided conversation. I'd love to hear from you on this topic. I'd love to hear from you on any topic. I'd love to know what I can learn from you or how I can help you learn. So you can reach out to me anytime, jbeveridge@cornerpostmanagement.com. you can visit me and my company at cornerpostmanagement.com or jeffbeveridge.com. They both go to the same place, but it's been brought to my attention that my name is actually a little bit more memorable than my company's name. So type either one into your web browser, you'll be able to find me. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Take care.